Hi, good morning. I would like to thank you for participating in today's webinar, How to Avoid the 3 Biggest Mistakes in Managing Machine-Generated Data. With me are Kathy and Jeff. Kathy, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Kathy Barboza. I work in Intel, and it says I'm the Director of Software Alliances, just so you know. A lot of people don't know that Intel is a big software company. And it's my job to work together with services companies and software companies to ensure that Intel architecture delivers the best and most optimized performance solutions to your end customers. So I'm here today with phoenixNAP and Panzura to talk to you about how we're all working together to deliver a great solution for you. Ian?
Thank you. Jeff?
Sure. Hi, thanks, Ian. My name is Jeff Tudor. I am the Senior Vice President, General Manager for Vision.ai. Vision.ai was a platform started by Panzura, which provides data management services for hundreds of enterprises spanning hundreds of countries and providing over 300 petabytes of data under management. And during this time of working with our customers, we saw their request for better analytics tools to discover their data and manage both their user-generated data as well as the machine-generated data. And because of this, we created Vision.ai platform, which we will talk about later today, to manage the petabytes of machine-generated data coming off our customers' footprints.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And my name is Ian McClarty. I'm president of phoenixNAP. And I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about phoenixNAP. So phoenixNAP, we are a pure IaaS provider. We're physically located in over 15 different regions. We have high connectivity, high bandwidth in all regions. We interconnect all of our locations as well. We provide infrastructure stacks that range from very traditional cloud-based stacks based on VMware technology, and to very specialized bare metal infrastructure. And both Intel and Panzura have been a great Vision.ai have been a great partner with us in this journey as we are trying to better embrace big data and analytical needs that every single industry in the market is trying to tap into. phoenixNAP. Oh, sorry. So a couple things with data, and I was reading some interesting stats. This slide doesn't really do justice to how big and how exponential the growth is in data analytics and data consumption right now. Really, we're looking at in the last 2 years alone, over 80% of the data that is active right now was created. 80%. So that means that all the world's data on the last, since we started computing, really has amounted for only 20% of that data, and that's going to be an exponential growth curve every single year, and it's going to continue to double and double for the next couple of years. So we don't see that stopping. I mean, more IoT devices, more edge compute coming in. We're still in the infancy stages of all of this data gathering, data collection, and then I'm starting to hear the buzzword nowadays, which is it used to be big data was the buzzword. Now I'm hearing big data 2.0 coming in. I'm hearing analytics 2.0, 3.0 coming in. So now it's an evolution. It's starting to get into the next phase. And I think companies like Vision.ai and Intel are really helping to be at the forefront of a lot of these changes that are happening. We ourselves, we're trying to adapt fast and provide bigger pipe, bigger resources. It's taking a lot of compute. It takes a lot of storage. Being able to move data around really fast. That's where we come into play, and we do it as a pure infrastructure play. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I think the three of our companies coming together really proves a point that it takes an ecosystem to support the type of growth in data that's happening. Just to put this in perspective, you see ZBs, EBs, GBs. A zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. And from a scale perspective, if you were to store 200 zettabytes on Blu-ray discs today, you'd have a disk that could stack of disks that could go to the moon about over 20 times. So it's quite the amount of data. And the data is being generated across three major segments. This is kind of how IDC stacks it up. The three segments are the core, and that's our traditional data and cloud data centers, such as your 16 data centers at phoenixNAP spread across the world, where you have centralized servers. But that's not only where the data is growth. It's growing at the edge. The edge are these branch offices, but the edge with 5G is now into the cell towers. And there are some very interesting startups now that are focused on providing data center capacity, even within these very small cell tower environments for low power computing of machine data. And that's just a real growth area. The other aspect is endpoints, and these are the things that we all have, our PCs, our laptops, and our cell phones. So combined, you have these three concentric rings working together and generating all this data. And this is also being driven the fact that about 50 billion devices are expected to be connected by 2025. Just the amount of telemetry coming off your Apple Watch and your Fitbit is all feeding into this massive growth, which is really stunning in the history of IT if you've been in it for a while. So what we see, and this is what the analysts talk about, which is the promise. Okay, the promise of taking all the machine data is that you can then apply new ML algorithms and AI algorithms around that using deep learning, using TensorFlow, using things like Apache Spark and MLib and PyTorch and all the great open source tools there are to take that data and then run it through a pipeline so that you can do data classification, you can do predictive analytics on it, you can, and these predictive analytics and AI have use cases from, AI operations for security and just general IT management to self-driving cars and everything in between. So that's the great promise. And depending upon who you talk to, folks expect it to drive about almost $16 trillion of GDP by 2030. So from a scale perspective, that's like adding another US or China economy into the global ecosystem simply by harnessing AI to solve our daily problems and whether it's e-commerce and transportation logistics. So that's the great stuff that's on the promise side. But the reality is that it's still tough. We see businesses struggle to manage the machine data environments. And if you talk to people like O'Reilly, which knows the industry really well, they say there are really kind of three areas of problems. One is the lack of the company culture. Really pushing investments in analytics. So if it's not a priority for the company, then it's not going to be implemented. Second is a lack of data to run the analytics, just the inability to have that data. And then the lack of skill sets to operationalize the data. So we have all this great upside, but then we have a reality which without effective management of this machine data, we're never going to get to that 16 trillion kind of upside opportunity and all the wonderful benefit. So you really can't reap the full benefits of the machine learning revolution unless you can start solving some of the problems associated with it. And that's what we're going to hear to talk to today with you about, is how we can address these problems, start solving, take actions to really unlock the value of the machine data in your organization.
Jeff, I have a quick comment. Do you believe that these problems are also exponential too, meaning that they're just going to compound themselves over time? They're just going to get worse?
Well, certainly, if you don't come up with a plan now, you're going to be playing catch up later. And as we know in the IT world, playing catch up is an expensive game to do. So by laying that foundational element, then you're going to be in a much better position to not have to play catch up later. That's for sure. But the other, it's also the data-driven economy is one where if you are not taking advantage of your data and your competitors are taking advantage of their data, then they're going to have better customer offers. They're going to have a better IT operations, better customer service, lower customer support costs, and you're not. And so that's why all the analysts expect, we talk about it from an IT perspective, but really it's a business profit and loss perspective. And if you're not putting that plan in place and manage that machine data and driving value from it, you may not even be around in 5 to 7 years. I know that's a really bold out there statement, but it's just what people are saying out there in the marketplace. If you pick up, if you go by the airport and you look at the shelf and you look at things like Harvard Business Review or Fortune or Forbes, all the magazines that are studying the future of business, it is going to be data is the new oil, they say. It's going to be a data-driven business. So if you're not laying down the foundation today, then you may not even be around or reap the rewards later because your competitors will. So it's driving this hyper competition, which is a really interesting environment, and we see it at a macro scale in the streaming wars that are going on, right? Everybody's capturing user preferences of what they watch in television. And now at a micro level, we see it in, a business that can better understand their inventory, lower their cost, increase their turnover, et cetera. These are the types of things that are going to drive the future.
Thank you.
And the big mistake we see and the analysts have indicated as a number one mistake, and that's really not having a plan to manage machine data at all. Now, while that might sound a little out there, IDC says that 40% of organizations have no formal plan for machine data management. And this is the biggest mistake, and the one that in order to get a plan together, you have to kind of sit down and make some assumptions. Now, doing nothing is not a very good option. For those of you that do business in California, on January 1st of 2020, the California Consumer Privacy Act went into effect. And the CCPA basically says that there's kind of a few requirements, but even if you're not based in California, but you collect personal data on at least 50,000 people, you have to implement a number of controls so that California citizens can manage how their personal data is used. And fines for not complying with that can be up to $7,500 per record. Now, you're talking about tens or thousands or millions of records. Now you're starting to get into these massive issues. And I personally don't live in California, but I see this across all of our customers. They're just grappling with what does this mean? And it's just like in Europe with GDPR. Now, how does this manifest itself in a machine data? Well, part of the service is if you're running a website, you have to have an opt-out or a link to manage your personal information. So as a owner or a compliance officer, I need to make sure that on every web page that that opt-out is available, and that until that opt-out is selected or opt-in is selected, that I have a record of that, right? So it's just systems of record for machine-generated data that this is displayed, that's across all web pages, and that's the type of analytics that you really need to collect. The second thing, and when there was discussion on the House floor, the former presidential Kamala Harris was saying in the Senate, in the floor and in the discussions in California, that the Center for Internet Security really needs to be applied by companies. And the Center for Internet Security, I think it's CIS.org, you can go there. They have a list of recommended actions to put your business in compliance or better compliance with all of these new things that are created and new rules that are created. And one of those is CIS Control 6, and that is specifically around logging of machine data. And it says ensure local logging has been enabled on all systems, and that they have been aggregated into a centralized management system along with log retention policies. So, there's one reason to do it, which is because it's good for your business and it's going to make it more competitive. There's another reason to do it, which is if you don't do it, you could potentially be held liable for lack of procedures and policies if there's a failure to comply and a lawsuit out of that. So it's just good policy, and the fact that 40% of companies don't have those policies already implemented just leaves them at risk. And I think what we need to do, and this is probably something, Ian, you run across, is that across your data centers, you want to know who's in your data centers, what those types of activities that are taking your data centers, and what events they might be able to track out of there. I mean, Ian, are there, if you look at your massive machine data generator across your data centers and across the thousands and thousands of servers that you generate, what do you see as important for managing and knowing that your operations are running smoothly?
No, that's a great question, and it's multifaceted answer. I mean, one of the first things is network. We need bigger and bigger pipes, bigger connectivity, not just between internet connection, but really down to the to the east and west traffic, meaning rack to rack. So from a top of rack perspective, we were making a lot of investments and continue to make investments in upgrading network connectivity and also network insight. What's actually going on. And so we are looking at analyzing very complex flows. We're analyzing more and more flow data every day as the network grows, and providing this visibility back to our clients. We do things even to protect that data too, like DDoS mitigation at the edge, and we see an increased threat vector because of all this data that we do have and we do collect. We have to up our security game every 6 months. We have to add more resources, add more capacity. So it's a continuous capacity increase. On the storage and on the infrastructure side itself, looking at technologies that are skinning the cat better, such as yours, are critical to that. It's such a large amount of data that's coming through. You can't just throw bodies at it. You can't throw enough software development at it. You have to find solutions and answers that are more creative. And you also have to do it in a cost-effective manner as well, because as this data becomes bigger, it has to be commoditized down. It has to be tiered down and scaled down. And one answer fits all for how you manage that data doesn't work anymore. I mean, it really is a tiered environment, tiered system structure that has to be set up to be able to even manage the data nowadays. Those are some of the things that we're doing right now. It's always just an increase in consumption, it's an increase in availability, and it's an increase in visibility. So they kind of all go hand in hand.
Yeah, I would imagine also because you are supporting compliance requirements that you have run book and centralized reporting procedures that you can give into your auditors and such like that they can check mark and make sure that you're doing all the things you need to do from a legal perspective to meet those data center security and compliance requirements.
Oh, definitely, and that landscape changes. I mean, every year compliance gets harder, right? It doesn't get easier, it gets harder.
Yeah.
New updates are done on a yearly basis. You have to adapt to those updates. You have to provide more proof. You have, auditors now themselves are held liable. I mean, it used to be that, as an example, PCI auditing was relatively lax in many years, and while data breaches that have been occurring, I mean, PCI security has been at the forefront. So now they're going after, the Card Association and government entities are going after, the C-level. They're going after the auditors themselves. So there's a lot more. There's a lot more accountability on all fronts, and that's something that we also have to adapt. I mean, security is something that we take in compliance. We take very seriously. Product lines that are around those different features are really meant to be bolt-on in a lot of ways. We are not in a sense making your security stance, but what we're doing is giving you compliance-friendly infrastructure services that an auditor sees. There's accountability there. There's reporting. There's logging. There's all the key features that they need. It follows their standards, so it makes it supplementary to your compliance stand.
Yeah, so it's a good point. It's getting harder, not easier. And going into what you were saying, what are some of the things that should be monitored? If we just look at all of the as we mentioned earlier, it's going to be the core, it's going to be the edge and the endpoint. And if you were building a next generation operating model for the digital transformation for your business, your footprint of things to collect data on is also growing. It's not just your Apache web server logs or your database logs kind of to collect when there's an error. You're looking at sensors. I know, Kathy, at Intel, they've got some amazing things. When we were in the briefing center recently, your industrial drones. Intel's creating these drones that can communicate back to the servers, but they can communicate with each other and have these formation of IoT things, right? So it was a really amazing technology. And so the amount of systems of record just are also hitting that exponential growth, because it's not just the things inside your firewall, it's the things that are going outside your firewall, and your RFID tags. And so if we just kind of look at this, I'd imagine that you have your routers and firewalls, like your device failures, traffic rule changes, logins, IP address maps, being able to track and look geo IP for all of the traffic that's coming into around your public, as well as where it's going to inside your private once the user sessions enter there. And then from compliance requirements, your logins, password changes, new account creations, you might want to get notified if there's a new account created on any of your Linux servers, for instance, as well as application installs and removals. If you have software that is tracking mechanisms and someone removes that software, you could be in for some trouble there. So what we have heard from our customers is Active Directory is one of the most important things they want to look at, because they want to see if permissions have been changed. Because if somebody surreptitiously changes permissions on an Active Directory server, then that can change a whole footprint of who might have access to that data, and then having that data exfiltrated from their organization and the data breach coming from that. And another example, I guess, when this is one of the the palm to forehead examples, was when custom companies have S3 buckets where they're storing data, but the administrator makes that data or that bucket public instead of private, and now all of these scanners that are scanning these buckets can go in and extract data and database from that. I mean, it's just, you've got to collect all that telemetry to make sure you don't have publicly accessible buckets that shouldn't be there, right? So it just seems to be that there's this massive flow of data that we all want to connect. So the amount of connectors is much more than just connecting stuff from your firewall. But you do need to collect things from your firewall, but it's other things as well. And even, companies having more of the legacy mainframes and AS400s and these types of things, it's very important, obviously, to capture those too. What we have seen along the customer base is there's kind of 4 main use cases here. You've got application monitoring and root cause analysis. That's just saying, is my application up? If it fails, let me go back in and look at the failure. So that's one thing they're going to track with machine data. Another one is VMware and IT ops infrastructure and monitoring. Obviously, that's an evergreen use case. How much storage do I have left in my VMware environment? Are my VMs crashing? How many CPUs do I have? What's the utilization of those CPUs? Do I have an event management, such as storage LUNs that have gone offline, et cetera? And then SIEM, one of the most common use cases for machine data collection, and that's just basically who's accessing in my firewall, who is accessing any of my protected devices. You'll have any login failures, this type of thing. And then regulatory compliance. And this is with the PCIA, this is the CCPA, this is the alphabet soup of compliance requirements that need to get done with it. So these are the four main categories of plans that need to be implemented. As you were saying, Ian, the lack of regulatory compliance can just kill a business, like literally and figuratively, and it's just getting more complex. So coming up with the right plan, there's lots of auditors that can support with that. There's lots of resources on the internet of potential plans. Just highly recommend that's that first mistake that we make sure we don't repeat. So we promised 3 mistakes today that we have seen that we wanted to highlight to take preventive action to do that. So that's mistake number 1 is not having a plan. Mistake number 2 is just not getting actionable insight from the data you collect. And this is the black hole phenomena, or the data rot phenomena. And that is, all right, well, I've got a plan, and the plan is all my logs go to a server that's sitting in this particular rack, and it's got 400 terabytes on it, and we're going to just collect every bit of data that comes in across all of our servers, and we're going to retain it for a year. Well, that's wonderful, but it might make your job easier if you had to go and find a log when something went wrong in your data center, but it's not going to give you the insight to help drive your business better. And so we have seen the lack of customers investing in insight as the biggest challenge of all. And this is just a really small example of this, because if you look on the left, you have just a stream of JSON data with a timestamp. And these are things such as, what is my host? What is my user agent that has looked at it? What is the web page they've gone to? What's my system OS, etc. So it's just a stream of data. And ideally, you want to be able to extract value from it. And so having the right visualization and dashboarding capability is really super important. And so let me walk through what that might be. So if you look on the left, you could just see the data, and the streaming data might show you had 2,000 sessions, in the past 60 days to a particular website or a particular path on your website. So that's just your raw data. Your analytics would show you where the sessions came from and at what times. And so that little graph with the bar graphs there, that's just basically give you tracking hits over time, so that you can know when your users are active, maybe when you want to run your email campaigns and this types of stuff. But the insights then you can drive to that is correlating that data. So the insight would be, well, out of those 2,000 sessions during these time windows, my users from the New York geography were 20% more likely to buy than any other geography. And now I know that I should invest more into my New York media segment than the rest of my global segment, reallocate resources. And so that same data that's sitting there on your left, seemingly just, textual noise, you can really drive insight from it, but you need to put into place that analytics process. And I think that's the table stakes for driving that value from it. And what we have seen also is that each company is going to have something different of what matters to them. So really need to decide what matters to you. What is your business objective? 50% of users will abandon a website if it takes longer than 3 seconds for that page to load. So you might want to track how long your page load times are. Database errors or slow query response times. I mean, these are some of the things, Ian, I would open up to you if there are certain things that you look from as having to operate this massive data center. Is it network, or what are some of the things that your data center looks at for the overall health of its business?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, not just the uptime on the machines is very important, right? But there's always a whole troubleshooting aspect that happens when a lot of our clients are developing software. they're software service companies. They have a specific application. The first thing that always gets blamed is the network. If there's anything going on with the network at all, we have to provide a lot of transparency. We have to do a lot of troubleshooting. So network for us is very important. It has ripple effects. I mean, it's the underlying core. So for us, network visibility is what is key. And then also infrastructure health, right? The infrastructure itself needs to be in a very stable position. It can't have a hiccup. It can't have things. You have a hiccup on a database, or you have just this random problem that keeps on occurring on hardware. You have to be on top of it. You have to be, and you have to have the transparency and the insights into all those things. So we are actually very involved when it comes to infrastructure itself and software troubleshooting. We're always it's as a service provider should be. It's the first line defense, and it's also the first one that gets blamed. And so we work hand in hand with a lot of our clients to do troubleshooting on what's going on from a software hiccup perspective or software stack perspective. For us, it's very easy to know when it's something on our end, but we also have to show proof so that it helps their troubleshooting efforts, and they can nail down to maybe a software bug, software hiccup, software incompatibility sometimes that's going on, and it helps. So it's very much partnering, and it's always kind of like a joint troubleshooting effort that happens on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and in the cloud, especially, what we have seen is, if a customer is complaining of, especially if they're using something like cloud storage, then you could have great performing cloud storage, 1,000 miles away from you. But if your network is experiencing packet loss, then it's gonna, your speeds of access are gonna slow to a crawl because your TCP connections just are gonna continue to throttling down because of your packet loss. So, absolutely being able to look at the full end-to-end path of what your customer is trying to accomplish, I could see being very, very important. So we've talked about the lack of driving insight. We've talked about the lack of a plan, and we'll talk a little bit more about mistake number 3, and that's really not monitoring enough due to just the cost and difficulty of implementing a plan. And what IDC has done a lot of research in this. Gartner's done a lot as well, and they surveyed about 180 businesses and enterprises, and found that the top 3 issues that they were finding was the cost of data storage, the cost of customizing it to the problems that they were trying to solve in their organization, and just overall integration difficulties. We're still, it appears, struggling to have solutions that are both cost effective and simple. And so you kind of have to go through a suboptimal decision-making process of figuring out, okay, how am I going to solve this pretty massive challenge of storing and managing all of this data? And so as we talk about cost, we also talk about it's really easy to pay too much. In this particular picture, what we talk about is about a 20 gigabyte of log indexing per day. Now, the average business index is about 100 gigs per day. So this would be, a small to medium business that would be 20 gigs a day. This might be, 100 different VMs or something like that. And wanting to retain that data for 60 days, which honestly is probably a little bit too short of a time, but you might want to archive some of this data. So there's a number of vendors out there. If you search for log data management or machine data management solutions, you'll find a lot of vendors playing in the space. That's good because it creates competition around them. But you'll also see a variety of price ranges, ranging, as high as 36 grand for that month, down to 10,000 per month if you wanted to, per year, 36,000 per year to 10,000 per year, just depending upon how you wanted to procure it, whether you wanted to do it offsite as a service or whether you wanted to do it on site and build it yourself. And we're going to get into how we can make this less expensive in a couple of minutes. And I think Kathy can share some of the work that Intel has been doing with its new architectures to really reduce the cost and increase the capabilities of machine data systems. But this is, kind of the key thing is pricing is still very expensive. And then so I think today companies have three options basically. They can buy a proprietary platform. The deployment of that's pretty simple because it's just a software package. You can do an install there, but you're going to pay a pretty expensive licensing cost for that software package based upon how much data you need to support. And then you have to manage that internally. So that's, let's say a product like Splunk or something like that, very popular. Deploy it on premise, wrap it up. You're going to pay your license fee, and you're off to the races there. We also have open source platforms, but open source can be complex to try to do it yourself. But it is low cost, so you don't have the pricing pressure of that. But management of that is going to be internal. So you're still going to have the expertise in-house to manage that open source. And then finally, you have companies like Vision AI. What we have done is really tried to focus on that open source capabilities, but at a very low cost. And then most importantly, offering that as a service into, basically turnkey service, register, immediately start ingesting data. All of the data is secured within phoenixNAP data center and managed on demand. So that's really where we see these options opening up. And I think this third option of going to a service provider to manage service logs, I think is really, really where the fastest growth are. It's typically growing about 20% a year. And you have companies like Datadog that recently went public, a very successful IPO, has grown super fast, and it's doing things such as APM. You have Sumo Logic, which will probably soon go public, and other companies around there. So certainly encourage you to look at solutions like that. Now, we at Vision AI and phoenixNAP and what we're doing with Intel are taking the approach to move to open source. Open source because now you have thousands of developers building data connectors with these things called beats, these lightweight data shippers that can move data from your log files or from your Cisco ASA firewall or Palo Alto network switches or Meraki wireless access points or whatever you have in your organization. There's a data shipper for it. That data shipper can come in. Then you can basically take all the telemetry that you want. You can move it across the wire into your service provider. In this case, we're running Elasticsearch. And then you have the visualization tool of Kibana so that you can visualize it and make sense of the data that you have ingesting. And it's taking this really cool, super powerful open source platform and then turnkeying it as an easy to consume service, which is the approach that we've taken. And the great thing for the customer is it's open source. It's an open platform index. If you wanted to say, hey, I want to get out of the, I want to move out of a service provider and start doing this internally, you simply download those indexes and you've got them, and you can, basically take those into internalize them, ingest them, and have it outside of the service provider in a format that you can work with. So there's no lock-in, there's no long-term restriction on how you use your data. So that's what we're very excited about, and working with phoenixNAP and working with Intel. And I think that's very key because if you're looking at Elasticsearch and some of the new log analytics where you can start putting in machine learning algorithms on top of that, doing anomaly detection, this is where really accelerating the Elasticsearch with Octane is very excited. We have been with phoenixNAP an early adopter of Octane. Octane it has just been such a profound impact on us because we're able to get 3 to 5x the throughput, at 3x the throughput at about 5x lower latency in our phoenixNAP infrastructure with Cascade Lake and at Intel Octane. And I'd like to turn it over to Kathy to tell us a little bit about where Intel is doing with Octane and where you see it fitting in as this next generation memory architecture for machine data.
Yeah, thanks. Great. Thanks, Jeff. So some of you might be wondering, Intel, you're used to seeing us in the CPU business, right? We build CPUs that power phoenixNAP, that power the software companies that give the performance that companies need to run their software. But what you might not know is that Intel is back in the memory business. We were in it a long time ago in the 90s and got out of it, and now we're in it. And the reason we got back in the memory business is because we saw what was coming with this explosion of data. And our company's been talking about it for the last 10 years, that we knew all this data was coming as we see these devices on the edge. And we knew that we had to design hardware that was going to be able to ingest all this data. And so probably about 7 years ago, we started designing this new form of memory, and it's basically called persistent memory. And the whole idea is it fits into a DRAM slot, but it provides persistence, and in this case acts as, you can use it in a couple different ways. You can use it as a full persistent model, where you basically dump data into it and it acts just like DRAM. And then you can use it as a storage device where you're using it as really fast, like a cache layer. And then there's also a way for you to use it as just straight memory, where you basically pool your DRAM and your persistent memory together and just create a big memory pool. And so by building out this new memory architecture, Intel realizes that phoenixNAP service providers, IaaS providers, even your own data center is going to have to ingest more and more data, and the DRAM was just not going to be able to keep up. And so we introduced this new memory in April, and we've been working with ISVs to basically to do great solutions on top of it. And that's what's happened here. Both with phoenixNAP and Panzura, is they've designed the solution and used this new memory architecture to basically come up with a new platform from the software to the hardware that gives you the 3x higher throughput, the 5x latency. And the good news is this memory is about, in some cases, less than half the cost of DRAM. Now, that doesn't mean that you can get rid of DRAM in your system. It's not a DRAM replacement. It's complementary to DRAM. So in most cases, if you have a server and it's got, let's say 24 memory slots in it, you're basically putting, half those slots are going to be some form of DRAM and half those slots are going to be some form of Intel persistent memory. But we're very aggressive in our pricing, and we're to see this inflection in the market. And we're working very much with the ecosystem of not only the cloud providers out there, the ISVs, but also any of the OEMs and the channel and the NFIs and the GSIs to basically provide this to the market ahead of the need. That's the whole idea with Intel. We have to provide hardware ahead of the need, because what a lot of people don't know is this hardware, this memory architecture, been designing it for 7 years. It takes that long to design silicon and get it into the ecosystem. So Intel has to have those insights and then has to work with our ecosystem to ensure that we're delivering it to you, the end customer, and bringing what people need when they need it, rather than falling behind and bringing things to market after maybe some of our competitors. So that's it. So it's a new form of memory, and it's pretty cool and pretty cheap and works really well. And phoenixNAP and Panzura here are two of the leaders in providing this to market first.
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that, and I also thank Ian and phoenixNAP and William Bell, who have invested in deploying this as some of the early adopters, because it's really not available yet commercially in any other mega cloud providers. And I think it goes a long way to show what kind of targeted, focused, fast-moving cloud providers and some of the smaller data center providers, I say smaller, large data center providers, just smaller than you would think a footprint of AWS or something like that. Something that they're doing that can enable their customers to provide these services. Let me
just give a little bit of color on that. The reason is, like the GCPs and the AWSs, they're all coming to market. The thing about kind of what and Ian, I hope you don't like the boutique next wave CSPs. What we see is, the big AWS and Azure, and they have all kinds of money, right? And they build their data centers, they build it, and they will come kind of perspective, so they have this huge amount of capacity. Whereas some of the more boutique next wave CSPs, they build it as the customers come. So they're able to stay on the edge of technology a little bit more than AWS, Google's, and Azure does, because they want to sell what they already have capacity for, right? And they have a lot of excess capacity. And so that's why I think some of these next wave CSPs, as we call them at Intel, are more fast to market, is because they build it as the technology comes out, so they're able to stay more on the cutting edge.
Yeah, and Ian, I'd like to turn it really quick, because back to you, one of the things that when we started working with phoenixNAP, we think of, of course, the great colo capabilities that you can provide across all your regions, but you've been increasing in new services beyond just co-location and managed servers. What are some of the new services that you're offering in 2020?
Well, right now, one of our big corporate initiatives is really putting an API in front of everything that we do from a orchestration perspective. So, and what that means, we have a very strong bare metal stack. We see ourselves as a market leader in that space, and are quickly going. When we try and put ourselves in position one for that, we're building, and we've been doing orchestration, automation for years and years, since the infancy of the company. What we're really looking forward to now is putting a nice API wrapper around that. As an example, we're working on being able to launch bare metal infrastructure, physical infrastructure, not virtualized, but physical infrastructure, in a matter of sub 2 minutes, sub 1 minute. Those are our goals, corporate goals, for 2020, to really bring to market API-driven, pay by the hour infrastructure services that are dedicated, not virtualized resources. And so you can put your own software stacks on top of it. You can put your own virtualization on top of that. Really create a core underlying layer that is API focused and API first. That's one initiative. The other things too that we've been doing, especially with Intel, have been Flex servers, and those are very exciting for us. They're basically a way to vertically scale up processing power. You can vertically scale it up, or you can vertically scale it down, without the need to rip and replace infrastructure. So once you have established a database system, or you've established a very heavy CPU workload, you can come in at with a comparable rate of a 4000 series processor with an Intel Xeon scalable processor line, and move it up all the way up to an 8000 series. And we have 7 steps in between that technology, and that's something unique to us right now. And we've been very thankful to Intel and for those involvements, and that kind of resonates to what Kathy's saying. It's part of our corporate culture to really be at the forefront of hardware infrastructure stacks. And I'm not building for the many, I'm building for the specified workload. And by doing that, we do find patterns, we do find web scale, prowess, right? We're not a hyperscaler, we're a web scaler in a lot of ways. We can do things in mass, but we're not doing it in the tens of thousands, we're doing it in the hundreds and 2000s. So it's a different play. It's more intimate. We can definitely do more customization. We can do workloads that are more specific to what you need. Kind of marry that workload to the infrastructure side. So it's more about right sizing your IT technology to you, versus just a one size fits all, and here are your t-shirt sizes, right? That's not our goal as an organization. Is to just do t-shirt sizes. We want to basically build, offer you some t-shirt sizes, but offer you as well some custom suits. And so it's just a different play.
Yeah, and I think it bodes well. I just saw one of the kind of mega trends for the 2020s, and these workload-specific infrastructure providers was one of them. And I think that goes a lot to say your ability to move quickly when things like Octane, when things such as Cascade Lake came out, when things such as ESX 6.7 of VMware vSphere came out, right? So being able to upgrade, move fast, and there's a lot of exciting technologies on the rise, and I'm sure you get tons of briefings every day from vendors that are working on new things such as specific AI, ML semiconductors and things like that are going to be coming out. So we appreciate your leadership on that. So as we wrap up the webinar, we want to kind of re-hit on what we feel the core value proposition needs to be as companies go out and look for machine data management, and that's going to be rapid deployment, simple and secure. We say infinitely scalable, which is just basically infinitely to your business, right? Scale as your business grows without having to come in and rethink about capacity. I know that's something that you, Ian, and talk about in your business, which is, let us worry about the scale. You just worry about, growing your business, and being resource efficient. right? So that you're not having to spend a lot of time managing software installations. Get this managed service and deployed easily, and that's our call to action at Vision.ai. Bringing the best of these technologies together, bringing the Intel Cascade Lake together with the Intel Octane persistent memory technology, which is really one of the first leading edge applications, allowing you to manage machine data with this really fast new memory tier, which we're excited to layer into it. And what we'd like to do is offer a free trial and special offer specifically for those webinar attendees who have come with us today along this journey and going through these 3 rules. And that's where we can provide a free proof of concept with 30 days. We have engineers that specialize in knowing how to connect your specific data, your servers, whether it's just a syslog server, whether it's one of a Meraki or one of the Cisco ASA firewalls, ingest that data, build dashboards, correlate it with other data that might be coming off of your application servers or your database, and give you not only the storage of that log, which accomplishes one objective, but the visualizations of those logs, and then being able to drive actionable insight from them. And so if you can go to the Vision AI Get 500, which is the URL for this, you can register up. We will follow up, and at the end of the 30 days by through this proof of concept and filling out a survey at the end, we will provide a $500 Visa gift card for those that have gone on this journey with us. So we do appreciate everyone. It does take an ecosystem to make this happen. Kathy, Ian, thank you. Thank the Intel team for working together on the technology with us with phoenixNAP. And we'd also like to thank VMware. They're not on this call today, but they have been an integral part of this overall journey with us. And thank you everyone for joining on this webinar today. I'd return it over to you, Ian, for any finishing words.
No, I mean, Jeff, you covered it very well. I mean, it definitely is an ecosystem. It's not about one company can do it all anymore. I mean, those days are long gone. The complexity of the network, the complexity of the software stacks, new evolving technologies that are out there, more data collection, more endpoints. I mean, it's a compounding effect, and not a single company can do it all by itself anymore. So, it definitely is about the ecosystem, the partnerships, working well with others, and just making a difference in the market. And with that, I would like to thank both Intel, Kathy, for your time, Jeff, and to our audience for joining us.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Kathy.
Yep. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out, giving us your hour.